Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, the beginning of the week, October 28th. Today is day 388 since the attacks by Hamas on the south of Israel more than a year ago. My daily updates seek to provide information that keeps us informed, but also gives us that for which we should pray, information by which that should inform our advocacy and our efforts as we work to end conflict and war and as we work towards peace. Lots of updates since the weekend. Israel fired a barrage of precise strikes on military targets in Iran on Saturday. This was local time. This was said to be in retaliation for the October 1st missile attack on Israel. The attacks that were launched from, it says Iraqi airspace is my update, hit air defense systems around Iranian energy sites, killing 4 Iranian troops, according to Iranian and Israeli officials. Israel also hit weapons production sites, crippling a critical component in Iran's ballistic missile programs, according to Israeli sources. Part of what was discussed was that, there was fear that Israel would attack either nuclear sites or oil. Some of the other Arab countries had fear that if Iran's oil was targeted, that some of their oil interests would also be destroyed in the process. It was said that the types of attacks were targeted, and they were targeted in such a way that Iran could talk about minimal damage. Israel notified Iran of the general targets of its retaliatory strikes in advance, which sometimes is a way to minimize the numbers of death. It warned Iran not to respond. There's a conversation that this could be the end, at least hopefully forever, but for at least a bit of the tit for tat, responses of Israel and Iran going back and forth. So the hope is that there will be, that this now a wider escalation will be prevented. Israeli and Iranian authorities seem to adopt a measured tone in large part in their response to the attacks on Saturday. Israeli Prime Minister stated the attack achieved all of its objectives, and the Iranian president, who's said to be a relatively moderate, Pezeshkian, said that Tehran will respond appropriately, but that it does not seek war. President Biden on Saturday said he hopes Israel's attack will mark the end of the country's cycle of escalation. The White House had expressed support for the attacks and called them appropriate and targeted. Iraq complained to the UN Security Council about Israel using its airspace to attack Iran ahead of the planned meeting that they were supposed to have later today to discuss the attack. Now, UN Security General Guterres said he was deeply alarmed by Israel and the attack on Iran. He called this an act of escalation, and I'm ignoring all the history that we've talked about in days before. I mean, we're on day 388, and I've done some updates where we've talked about, all of the escalations up until this point. So this is just a summary of the last 24, 48 hours. Moving on to Gaza, the Israeli government's policies and practices in North Gaza. It has been said by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, this was said on Friday, that it could amount to atrocity crimes, including potentially extending to crimes against humanity. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA, also warned that the entire population of North Gaza is at risk of dying. I will also say that I have quoted security forces from Israel who have even encouraged soldiers to not respond to orders that they've been given that could be potential war crimes in North Gaza. I've shared that in previous reports. Haaretz reported that the Palestinian Civil Emergency Service told Reuters that 100,000 people were marooned in Jabalia and Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun without medical or food supplies, but Reuters could not verify the number of people independently. The UK will consider providing intelligence that has been gathered from surveillance flights over Gaza to the International Criminal Court if they are requested, says the UK Ministry of Defense. And the health ministry in Gaza has said that the death toll in Gaza is now at least 43,020 people, that the number of people who have been killed in Gaza has surpassed 43,000. And those wounded has now surpassed 101,000. That number is 101,110 people wounded since October 7th of last year. Israeli strikes on Gaza yesterday killed about 70 people, with Israel's offensive in the north showing no signs of abating. I just want you to know the number of people who were said to be a part of Hamas prior to October 7th was 20 to 30,000 people. Those were the number of people who were officially a part of Hamas. And so you've killed. The death tolls are just astounding, just astounding. Israeli military said it captured 100 suspected Hamas militants during a Friday raid on one of the last functioning hospitals in North Gaza. Health officials and Hamas have denied any militant presence there. Prime Minister Netanyahu said at a Likud faction meeting that Israel is trying to advance a deal that would release several hostages in exchange for several days of a ceasefire. He said that there's a better chance of securing a deal now that Hamas leader Sinwar has died. Egypt yesterday proposed a possible 2-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. They're trying to facilitate this with the release of 4 hostages and the accompanying delivery of aid into Gaza. This was announced by President El-Sisi. And Hamas has said, they told the Saudi News that they are prepared to accept the Egypt proposal, adding that the organization is not optimistic that a permanent ceasefire deal could be reached prior to the U.S. presidential elections. Hamas is willing to discuss any proposal that would lead to a ceasefire, sources have said, but they are demanding guarantees that a temporary ceasefire would be extended after a round of initial negotiations, and they're waiting for a more comprehensive deal to be reached. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and 7 foreign counterparts have warned Netanyahu that the actions of his far-right finance minister could cause the implosion of the Palestinian economy, which would risk further destabilizing the region. And I have to mention that this was also a huge concern of Ambassador Liu, who's the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He and I met together in May, and he's an economist, and he just said that the Palestinian economy and its instability is one of the greatest security threats to the state of Israel. An Israeli airstrike in South Lebanon killed 8 people and wounded 25. The health ministry said yesterday. Israel did not comment, but said that they are carrying out targeted ground raids. And I wanted to give an update on UNRWA. That legislation was at the Israeli Knesset, and today Israel passed a law that bans UNRWA in Israel from operating in Israel. This legislation could impact its work in Gaza. The most significant fear is that the legislation will significantly or worsen the already dire humanitarian situation there. The ban does not refer to UNRWA's work in the other Palestinian territories, but the law was passed in part because of the allegations that UNRWA staffers were involved in the October 7th attacks. UN and Western allies have responded, citing fear of worsening humanitarian situations. Foreign ministers have expressed grave concerns over the legislation. And the ban of UNRWA, while it doesn't apply to operations outside of Gaza, it could impact it significantly because of the ability, or it doesn't apply to operations in Gaza. It could impact Gaza because of the ability for UNRWA and international staff to be able to get permits to travel in and out. You know, it bans UNRWA from working in Israel. And of course, you know, UNRWA has to go through the Israeli government, et cetera, to be able to get permits and things to travel in and out of the Gaza territory. So that is an update for the day. Continue in your efforts, you know, as a new week begins. Do not give up hope. There's much, much work to be done. So, and if you don't know what to do, go to our website, you know, sign up for our newsletters, consider being a donor, give, act, and pray. There's so much work to be done. There's a lot of late nights, a lot of work, and we can use support. You know, if you have energies and skills you want to use, please reach out because there's a lot of work ahead. And we will not give up hope, but we'll continue in our efforts. May God go before us. Amen.